Those assignments had given her the opportunity to visit 14 countries over the course of 2 short years, in addition to the 12 she'd already seen, and she had thoroughly documented her journeys, not only with her camera, but also in her journal, by far her most treasured possession. Every assignment carried with it the promise of a new adventure, but as she stared out the window, ignoring the unpleasant sway of the bus on the steep mountain road, she couldn't help but think that the snow-capped peaks surrounding the Hunza Valley had surpassed her wildest expectations. A brief shower earlier in the day had given way to a spectacularly clear blue sky, and the afternoon sun made the snow-topped spires in the distance glisten in ways she could never hope to capture on film. It didn't happen often, but there were times when she knew she could never do justice to the scenery, and while those moments were among the most thrilling of her personal life, they were hard to accept professionally. Still, she wouldn't have traded the sight for anything. After a while, the bus rocked slightly to the right as it swept around the mountain, and the splendid sight of Tirich Mir, the highest peak in the Hindu Kush range, faded from view as the bus began the long descent into Kunjarab National Park. Disappointed with the change in scenery, Rebecca turned in her seat and let her gaze drift over her fellow passengers. The vehicle was filled to capacity, which wasn't surprising given the time of year. Many were climbers destined for the world's most challenging peaks, and they were assured of permits only during the summer months. She had traveled with these people for weeks on end, and she'd come to know most of them fairly well. Sitting directly across from her was Benny Abruzzi, the rakish, handsome, long-limbed climber from Brescia. He was talking, with animated gestures as always, to Umberto Verga, his stocky Sicilian cousin. Umberto rarely spoke, and when he did, it sounded more like a series of grunts than actual speech, but Benny was only too happy to pick up his cousin's slack. He'd served as a caporal maggiore, an infantry corporal, in the Italian army. He'd also spent some time in Iraq, a fact he mentioned more times than Rebecca cared to remember. Abruzzi had spent hours bragging about his military exploits, and while Rebecca believed most of his stories, she wasn't impressed in the least. Unsurprisingly, the Italian's gaze was presently fixed on the trio of pretty Norwegian nurses who had joined them in Tashkurgan. That had been 2 hours earlier, and 40 minutes before the bus crossed from China into Pakistan via the Kunjarab Pass, the highest point on the Karakoram Highway. There was also the downtrodden group of Danish climbers who'd arrived at K2 4 days earlier with the goal of summiting, only to turn back at base camp in Concordia, and a small knot of aging Canadian trekkers. There was even a renowned American geologist by the name of Timothy Welch. The professor emeritus from the University of Colorado seemed to spend a great deal of time staring at his hands and muttering under his breath, which Sisnick found both amusing and a little unnerving. Benny managed to catch her eye, but she turned away before he could fix her with his usual lascivious stare. To cover her reaction, she hastily pulled her journal out of her Berghaus pack, undid the clasp, and started to scribble a few notes, catching up on the events of the past few days. It was hard to concentrate under the lean climber's intense gaze. She'd done her best to make her disinterest clear, but her efforts had clearly been wasted. Although she was just 23, the same age as Abruzzi, Rebecca had accomplished a great deal in her young life. For this reason, she tended to look down on many people her own age. She knew it was snobbish, but she couldn't help it. She was a driven woman, and that meant things like men, sex, and partying didn't figure high on her list of priorities. At the same time, she knew her looks had given her a considerable boost in her current career, that they would have helped her in any career. She took this in stride, though, and it didn't change the way she viewed her success. After all, she'd seen the recent U.S. edition of Outside magazine, and her picture on the page of contributing journalists had not been any larger than that of the editor-in-chief, a decidedly unattractive Swede in his mid-60s. This discovery had only confirmed what she already knew, that it was her talent, not her looks, that had made her one of the world's most sought-after young photographers. She looked up, startled out of her reverie as the bus shuddered, the driver downshifting suddenly. Craning her neck, Rebecca saw a number of vehicles parked alongside the